The chamber of the Galactic Council stretched wider than sight. The walls shimmered with light drawn from dying stars, their glow captured and bent to illuminate the marble floor beneath. Every sound echoed forever in that hall, every breath, every heartbeat, every whisper of judgment. It was the oldest place in the galaxy, where warlords and emperors came to be judged, where peace was decided and civilizations were erased with a word. And on this day, under that endless ceiling, one small human stood alone. Commander Alara Miles, Terran Defense Fleet. Height 1.7 meters. Mass too little. Weapon none. She looked impossibly small among the giants that surrounded her. At her back, the banners of the fallen hung like ghosts, the flags of the Terran colonies that had burned in the war. Each color told a story of failure, of retreat, of surrender. Humanity had been broken, scattered, hunted. The Council had gathered not to save them, but to decide how they would be remembered as pests or as a lesson. The Council's dais floated above the floor, a ring of alien power and presence. There was the blue-scaled Zyrene Chancellor, whose people had never lost a war. The six-eyed Krellian Judge, whose word could destroy worlds. The Varkun Prime, a creature of metal and sinew whose claws could cut through starship hulls. Each of them had ruled longer than humanity had dreamed of spaceflight. Each of them watched her with the same expression, pity, then boredom. The Varkun Prime was the first to speak. His voice was deep, layered, the sound of mountains grinding together. "She stands unarmed," he said, his golden eyes narrowing. "This is the representative of your species." A ripple of laughter ran through the assembly. "She requested audience," said the Zyrene Chancellor, her voice musical but sharp. "Let her speak her last words before the vote." Alara raised her head. The light caught her face, the bruises, the streak of soot across her cheek, the blood that had dried near her ear. She didn't look like a warrior. She looked like someone who'd lost everything and somehow kept walking anyway. She took one slow breath. Her voice was steady. "I came here to speak for Earth," she said. The Krellian Judge leaned forward, all six eyes unblinking. "Earth is dead." "Then I speak," Alara said, "for what comes after." The laughter stopped, just for a heartbeat. The Council didn't like humans, but they respected defiance. It was the only thing that ever amused them. The Varkun's claws flexed. "The Terran fleet burned, your armies fell, you have no colonies left, no allies, you have nothing." She met his gaze. "We still have me." He tilted his head. "A lone soldier, no weapons, no armor. You have come to beg for mercy, then." Alara smiled just a little, the kind of smile that wasn't made for joy but for survival. "Mercy," she said quietly. "No, I came for a fight." The chamber filled with voices, hissing, growling, clicking in 100 languages. The council speaker rose from her seat, slamming the staff of judgment against the floor. "Order!" The sound cracked through the air like thunder. Alara didn't move. "I request trial by combat," she said. Gasps filled the air. Even the Ancient Ones turned their heads at that. The council speaker's voice was sharp with disbelief. "You what?" Alara stepped forward, her boots echoing against the marble. "Trial by combat. As written in the Charter of the Infinite Accord, you question humanity's right to exist. I demand the right to prove it." "That law hasn't been invoked in 10,000 cycles," shouted one of the delegates. "Then it's about time someone remembered it," Alara said. The Varkun's claws scraped against the floor, sparks hissing where they touched the metal. "You challenge me." "I challenge the Dominion," she said. "And you lead them, so yes." For a long moment, the hall held its breath. Then the Varkun laughed, a sound like collapsing stone. "Very well, I accept." The speaker turned to him, aghast. "You cannot, she is unarmed." His grin widened, rows of metallic teeth gleaming. "Then it will be quick." The floor of the chamber began to change. Plates of silver metal unfolded like petals, forming a circle wide enough to hold a battle. The air shimmered with power, the arena's ancient systems awakening after ages of sleep. Alara stood in the center as the crowd drew back. Her heart pounded, but she stood straight, shoulders square. She had faced worse odds before, just never with the galaxy watching. Her gaze flicked upward to the light panels that ringed the ceiling. She could see the reflection of her own face, small and defiant. That reflection reminded her of the faces she'd lost, her squad, her captain, her sister. All burned away when the Dominion came. That was why she'd come here. Not to beg, not to survive, but to make them remember what humanity was. The Varkun stepped into the ring, his armor shifting like liquid shadow. Energy crawled over his arms. He stood twice her height, every muscle wrapped in glowing metal. "You may choose your weapon," the speaker said softly. Ilara shook her head. "No weapon." The chamber erupted again, disbelief, mockery, outrage. The speaker's voice trembled. "You understand what that means?" She nodded perfectly. The Varkun Prime tilted his head. "You truly wish to die unarmed?" Ilara looked up at him. Her eyes were calm. "You think weapons make the warrior," she said. "You're wrong." She took one step forward. "I am human." And as the ancient gong sounded, echoing through the stars, the crowd leaned in not because they expected her to win, but because for the first time in ages they wanted to see what a human would do next. The floor of the arena shimmered like liquid glass. Every step Ilara took left a faint ring of light, as if the ground itself remembered her weight. Around her, the council members leaned forward in their seats, eager for blood. Billions more watched across the galaxy, through screens and projectors. The ancient rules of the trial by combat had not been invoked in 10,000 years. Even the machines that prepared the arena moved stiffly, creaking like forgotten gods waking from sleep. Ilara felt the hum of the energy field beneath her boots. It was warm, alive, and dangerous. Across from her, the Varkun Prime stretched his arms. Plates of his armor shifted with soft, metallic groans, adjusting, reshaping, growing sharper. His claws extended, curved like sickles, glowing with blue heat. He smiled, or something close to it. "This is mercy," he said. "If I wished, I could end you before the first strike." Ilara said nothing. She was listening to his movements, to the rhythm of his breath, to the sound of his steps. Every soldier learned to hear the pattern before the attack. She rolled her shoulders, ignoring the pain in her ribs from the last battle. Her hands were bare. Her body was bruised, but her mind was sharper than it had ever been. The council speaker raised her staff. "The challenge is accepted," she declared. "The terms are final, no interference, no retreat. The fight ends with surrender or death." The speaker's gaze met Ilara's for a brief moment. There was something almost kind in her ancient eyes, pity maybe. "I am sorry," the speaker whispered. Ilara didn't answer. The gong rang. The Varkun moved first. He was fast, faster than light should allow a body that large to move. His claws slashed the air where she had stood, cutting a trail of blue fire. The sound was like thunder cracking open the world. Ilara threw herself to the side, rolled, and came up gasping. The air burned in her lungs, hot with ozone. The second strike came from above. She ducked again, felt the claws graze her hair. A single strand floated away, glowing where the heat had kissed it. The crowd roared. She kept moving. To the council, it must have looked pathetic, a fragile human dodging, slipping, running. But to Ilara, every step was calculation. She watched how he turned, how his right knee bent more than his left, how his balance shifted when he swung. He was strong, yes, but strength without rhythm was clumsy, and she could use that. He lunged again. She sidestepped and drove her elbow into his side. The impact barely registered. It was like hitting a wall of metal. He laughed, a terrible, grinding sound. "Do you truly think flesh can harm me?" Her ribs ached, her arm throbbed. She took a slow breath. "No," she said softly, "but I've learned something." He tilted his head. "What is that?" She smiled through the blood on her lip. "You aim too wide." He roared, swinging both claws at once, a massive, sweeping strike. She dove forward instead of back. The claws tore the air behind her, missing by inches. She slid on her knees, planted her hand on the arena floor, and used it to spin her heel, connecting with the side of his leg. The sound wasn't metal on metal. It was metal on something soft beneath. The Varkun stumbled, just slightly, but enough for her to see it. She'd found it, a joint, a weak point. He recovered fast, but she had seen. The armor wasn't perfect. It flexed at the hinge behind the knee, probably to allow faster running. She filed it away in her mind. He struck again, furious now. His claws slammed into the floor, sending shards of energy scattering like sparks. One hit grazed her shoulder, tearing cloth and skin. Pain burned through her, but she didn't cry out. She gritted her teeth, blood dripping from her arm, and kept her eyes on that weak spot. You bleed, he hissed. You are fragile. Maybe, she said, panting, but fragile things can cut too. He lunged again. This time she didn't dodge. She stepped into his swing. The movement was suicide unless you understood angles. She dropped low, the claws passing inches above her head, and drove her knee into the same weak joint. The impact made a dull crack. The Varkun staggered, surprised, not hurt, but shaken. The council gasped again. None had expected her to last this long. Enough, the speaker called. This is madness. But the crowd roared louder, not for the Dominion, not for the council. For her, for the small, broken thing that refused to die. Ilara's chest rose and fell with heavy breaths. Sweat and blood ran down her face. Her heart hammered, but her eyes burned with something fierce and ancient. The Varkun stared at her as if seeing a new creature entirely. You have no weapon, no shield, no power, and yet you fight. She met his gaze. That's what we do. He frowned. Why, you cannot win. Her lips curved into the faintest smile. Because losing isn't the same as giving up. For the first time, he hesitated. Ilara straightened, ignoring the pain. You want to know what humanity is? She said, her voice carried across the arena, clear and steady. We are the ones who keep standing, even when there's no reason to. The Varkun growled, shaking off his doubt. He raised his claws again. Then I will make you kneel. The light in the chamber brightened, casting their shadows across the walls, one massive, one small. Ilara squared her shoulders, planting her feet. Try, she said. The gong sounded again, louder than before. The second phase of the battle had begun. And though she bled and her body trembled, her eyes held something the galaxy hadn't seen in millennia, the fire of a human who refused to fall. The arena trembled as the second gong faded. Light poured down from the ceiling in bright columns, turning the floor into a field of fire and glass. The Varkun Prime stood tall at one end, armor alive with blue veins of power. Across from him, Ilara Miles, human, bloodied, unarmed, tightened her fists and faced him again. She could barely feel her left arm. Her shoulders screamed with every movement, and her ribs felt like shattered glass inside her chest. But she was still standing. And that, she knew, already meant something. The crowd had stopped laughing. No one was cheering anymore. Even the council had grown silent. They had expected a slaughter. What they got instead was a struggle and a human who would not fall. The Varkun tilted his head slightly. You are persistent, he said, his voice echoing through the chamber, but persistence will not save you. He crouched low, muscles tensing beneath living metal. I have tested you enough. Now I will end this. He moved faster than sight. One moment he stood across the arena, the next he was upon her. The air cracked around his claws as they sliced through the space where her chest had been. She threw herself backward, but not far enough. The claws caught her side. Pain exploded. Ilara hit the ground, sliding across the glowing floor. Her breath came out as a gasp, wet and sharp. When she looked down, her flight suit was torn open. Blood poured out, dark and glistening. The crowd made a sound, half gasp, half cheer. The Varkun stood over her, claws dripping red light. Mercy, he said, though his voice was mocking. Say it and this ends. She pressed her hand to her wound. The world swam, but she forced herself to focus. You think mercy is yours to give, she whispered. He frowned. What? Ilara's eyes lifted. We gave it first, she said, and swung her leg. Her boot connected with the same damaged joint she'd struck before. The sound wasn't loud, but it was right. A small metal crack, a shift in balance. The Varkun stumbled, his footing breaking. Ilara rolled to her knees and lunged forward, ignoring the pain, driving her elbow into the underside of his jaw. The impact made her arm go numb, but it worked. The Varkun's head jerked back. Sparks burst from a glowing line just under his chin, the seam of his helmet. He stepped away, growling low in his throat. The sound wasn't anger this time, it was surprise. The council leaned forward, even the speaker's eyes widened. The human had hurt him. Ilara staggered upright. Every breath was agony, every heartbeat a hammer against her ribs, but she smiled, blood running from the corner of her mouth. You bleed light, she said quietly. We all bleed something. The Varkun roared and charged. The ground shook under his steps. Ilara didn't back away. She ran toward him. At the last second, she dropped low, sliding between his legs and driving her fist into that damaged joint again. The armor buckled, the joint sparked, and his right leg gave out. The mighty warlord crashed onto one knee, the impact ringing through the floor. The crowd erupted into chaos. Some shouted in anger, others in disbelief. A few, the ones who understood battle, were silent with awe. The speaker's voice trembled. She struck him down. She struck him back, another corrected. The Varkun rose, slower now, his claws flexed. "You are clever," he growled, "too clever." He slammed one claw into the ground. The floor split open in a wave of energy. Ilara leapt, but the shockwave caught her midair and sent her crashing into the wall. Her body hit hard, something cracked, she didn't know what. She fell to her knees, gasping, her ears ringing. The smell of ozone filled the air. She could barely see. The edges of her vision flickered in and out, but she could hear his footsteps again, heavy and sure. "You are finished," the Varkun said. "You cannot rise again." Ilara coughed, tasting iron. Her hand shook as she planted it on the floor. "You keep saying that," she whispered, "and yet." She forced herself to stand. Her legs trembled, but they held. Her voice, though weak, carried across the hall. "You still have to prove me wrong." The crowd went silent again. For a long heartbeat, the two of them just stood there, the alien warlord and the broken human. Then, to everyone's shock, the Varkun laughed. It was not mockery this time, it was respect. "You are strange, human," he said. "You fight without reason." Ilara smiled faintly. "We fight because we must. Even when death is certain. Especially then." The Varkun's laughter faded. He straightened fully, eyes burning bright. "Then die well." He lunged again, both claws forward. Ilara waited until the last second, until she could feel the heat of the energy against her skin, then dropped and rolled toward him. Her hand shot up and struck the glowing seam beneath his chin again. Sparks burst. He reeled back. The energy along his armor flickered, dimmed, then flared wildly. Something had broken inside the suit, she could see it now, the unstable power core pulsing under his chest plate. He raised his hand to strike, but it faltered, stuttering midair. Ilara took one step closer. Her voice was soft now, but it carried. "You think power is in your claws," she said. "It is. It's in control, in knowing when to use it and when to stop." The Varkun hesitated again, confused. His systems glitched, lights flashing across his armor. And for the first time in the long history of his people, a Varkun looked uncertain. Ilara clenched her fist, blood dripping from her palm. "You're right," she said through her breath. "I am unarmed." She lifted her hand, trembling but steady. "But I don't need a weapon to win." Then she struck, bare-handed, human, defiant. Her fist met the flickering light of his core. The shock lit the arena like a sun being born. When the glare faded, she was still standing. He was. Smoke rose from the arena floor. The lights above flickered, throwing long shadows across the silver walls. Ilara stood in the middle of it all, chest heaving, one arm pressed to her ribs. The air stank of ozone and scorched metal. Every inch of her body screamed in pain. The Varkun Prime lay several meters away, his massive body still. His armor hissed, venting streams of hot blue vapor. Sparks jumped from the broken seams where her blows had landed. For a moment, no one moved. The galaxy held its breath. Then slowly, the Varkun stirred. He rose to one knee, groaning, the sound low and mechanical, half creature, half machine. His claws dug into the floor, carving deep grooves as he pulled himself upright. The crowd gasped, some cheered, others cursed. He wasn't dead, not yet. Ilara's heart sank, but she didn't step back. She stayed where she was, her stance steady, though her legs trembled. The Varkun's armor flickered, patches of light going dark and cold. His voice came out rough, glitching like a damaged transmitter. "You surprised me," he said. "No one has ever broken my shell." Ilara spat blood and wiped her mouth with the back of her hand. "Guess there's a first time for everything." The Varkun's eyes narrowed. "You fight like an animal, no weapons, no strategy, only instinct." She shook her head slowly. "No," she said, "not instinct, memory." He paused, confused. "Memory." She looked up toward the council. Her voice carried through the hall. "We humans remember everything," she said. Every loss, every war, every scar, we carry them with us in our bones, in our blood. That's what we fight with. The council members whispered among themselves. Some looked unsettled, others curious. The speaker leaned forward. Explain yourself, human. Ilara pointed toward the Varkun. He fights because he was made to win. I fight because I was taught to survive. The Varkun growled. Words will not save you. I don't need saving, she said quietly. I just need time. Before he could ask what she meant, she dropped to one knee and pressed her bloodied palm against the floor. The arena responded. A faint pulse rippled outward, invisible to most, but not to the machines. The floor shimmered where her hand touched it, the nanosteel trembling as if it were alive. The Varkun's eyes widened. What are you doing? Ilara smiled faintly. You think humans are primitive, that we're weak. But when you invaded our worlds, you took our technology, you studied it, you thought you understood it. The floor beneath her hand began to glow, lines of blue light racing outward in every direction like veins of lightning. What you never realized, she said, is that we never stopped learning from you. The Varkun took a step forward, uncertain now. His sensors flickered, trying to analyze the energy. Impossible, he hissed. You have no access to the systems. Don't need access, she said, standing again. I already left a seed. Her voice softened. Before I came here. It clicked for him then, the faint trace of Terran code hidden in the Council's systems, written in the old programming languages no one had bothered to erase. She had planted it in her message, the one that requested this hearing. A Trojan horse made of hope and desperation. The arena trembled, the metal under their feet began to shift. The crowd shouted, alarms blared, and the speaker's staff glowed red with warning. Stop this, the speaker cried. You'll collapse the arena. Ilara didn't move. You told me to come unarmed, she said, so I used the only weapon I had left. The floor rippled again, forming waves of light. The nanites that built the arena obeyed her command now, recognizing her human signature through the code she'd buried in them. The Varkun lunged at her, roaring, This is treachery. Ilara sidestepped, barely dodging his claws. She reached out and touched his damaged armor again. The light from her hand jumped to him, a spark that spread across his body, crawling into every joint and seam. The nanites reacted instantly. The Varkun's armor began to freeze, the living metal turning rigid. He struggled, clawing at himself. What are you doing to me? Finishing what I started. His claws swung wildly but slower now. The armor locked around his limbs. His movements turned jerky, desperate. He tried to tear it away, but the more he struggled, the tighter it bound him. Ilara stepped closer, her steps echoing. Her voice was low, steady. You asked what humans fight with, she said. It's not claws, it's not strength, it's not power. She lifted her hand again, blood dripping down her wrist. We fight with everything, every mistake, every weakness, every drop of pain. The Varkun's body jerked once, then froze completely. His armor dimmed, the blue light fading to gray. He was still breathing, alive but bound, kneeling before her. Silence filled the hall. The speaker stood, her ancient face unreadable. The human has taken control of the arena, she said softly. Ilara's voice shook now, the adrenaline fading. No, I just reminded it who built it. Her knees gave out. She caught herself on one hand, gasping. The council members spoke in a dozen languages at once. Confusion, fear, admiration. The Varkun lowered his head, his voice a rasp. You win. Ilara looked up at him, exhausted but unbroken. No, she said quietly. We survive, that's what we do. For the first time in living memory, the Council of Worlds fell silent, not because they were angry, but because they were humbled. The smallest voice in the room had changed everything. Ilara pushed herself up again, trembling but proud. Her eyes found the speaker. You wanted to know what makes us dangerous. The speaker nodded slowly. It's not what we build, Ilara said. It's what we become when everything we love is taken away. The speaker's gaze softened. And what are you now, human? Ilara looked around the arena, the scorched floor, the frozen warrior, the watching galaxies beyond the light. She smiled faintly, still standing. For a long moment, the arena was silent. The smoke had cleared. The floor still glowed faintly under Ilara's boots. The Varkun Prime knelt before her, frozen in the grip of the very metal he once commanded. The council members stared, unable to speak. They had watched countless battles across the stars, but none like this. None where the smallest, weakest creature in the room had won. Ilara's breath came in sharp gasps. Her body trembled. Every movement hurt. Her blood left dark streaks on the floor, marking where she'd stood, where she'd fallen, where she'd risen again. She didn't look like a victor. She looked like survival given shape. The speaker finally rose from her seat, staff glowing with faint blue light. "The combat is over," she said. Her voice echoed softly through the vast chamber. "The human stands victorious." Her words should have ended it, but something deep in the arena began to hum again. Ilara felt it before she saw it, a vibration through the soles of her boots, a pulse in the air. The Varkun Prime's armor flickered once more. "No," she whispered. The blue lights on his body flared, brighter and hotter than before. The nanites that had bound him shuddered, struggling to contain the power inside. His voice came out broken and low. "I am not finished." He rose, trembling, the air warping around him. Sparks poured from the cracks in his armor. His eyes burned brighter, not with strength, but fury. "You cannot chain the Dominion," he roared. He slammed his claws into the floor, and the arena answered. The nanites screamed in protest, the floor splitting open in a surge of molten light. Ilara staggered backward, shielding her eyes. "You'll kill us both." He laughed, wild and broken. "If I fall to a human, I take you with me." The speaker shouted orders, but her voice was drowned by the chaos. The crowd fled from their seats as arcs of energy lanced through the air. Ilara could barely stand. Her body refused to move the way she needed. Every step felt like walking through fire. But she had one thought left, one truth burned into her mind. If she stopped now, he would win again. She dragged herself forward. The Varkun turned to her, his features twisted in rage. "Stay down." She didn't. Her voice came out hoarse, barely a whisper. "We don't know how." He swung his claw, the air howling as it cut toward her. She dove aside, hitting the ground hard. The heat burned her skin. Her vision blurred, but she crawled back up, every muscle screaming. He raised his arm again, light gathering in his palm, a final strike, one that would end her completely. "Die, human." Ilara looked up at him. Her face was pale, her breath ragged. She had no strength left. But her eyes still burned with that quiet human fire. She whispered, "Not yet." Then she raised her hand, just one hand, shaking but steady, and pressed it flat against the floor again. The nanites recognized her signal. The arena systems flared back to life, obeying the same seed she had planted before. But this time, she wasn't asking them to fight him. She was asking them to protect everyone else. The floor around the council lifted, forming barriers of light to shield the delegates. The energy field curved upward, sealing the chamber in a dome of white fire. At the same time, the Varkun's armor pulsed, the energy within reaching overload. Ilara pushed herself to her feet, swaying. "You said I was unarmed," she whispered. "You were right." She took one step closer to him, the heat searing her face. "But I don't need a weapon." Her hand reached out, bloodied fingers brushing against the damaged core on his chest. "Because I am one." The energy exploded. A blinding wave of light burst outward, swallowing them both. The shock hit the dome she'd raised, shaking the entire chamber but holding firm. When the light faded, the arena was quiet again. The Varkun Prime lay still on the floor, his armor cracked, his eyes dim. His body smoked, the blue light gone. And Ilara. Ilara stood in front of him, barely. Her knees buckled, her body trembled with exhaustion. She looked down at him, at the creature who had burned her world, who had laughed at her weakness, and for a moment she felt no hatred. Only relief. He looked up at her, his voice faint, almost human. "You fought well." She nodded once. "So did you." His head fell back. The great warrior of the Dominion went silent. The crowd didn't cheer, not yet. They didn't understand what they'd just seen. Ilara's legs gave out and she dropped to her knees. The air was thick with smoke and heat. Her lungs burned. She could barely keep her eyes open. The speaker stepped forward slowly, the staff dimming. "End the trial," she said. "She has proven her right to stand." The guards hurried forward, but Ilara raised her hand weakly, stopping them. Wait, she murmured. Broadcast it. The speaker frowned. What? Alara turned her face toward the cameras, toward the unseen billions watching across the stars. Let them see, she said softly. Let every world see. The speaker hesitated, then gave a slow nod. And across the galaxy, the feed stayed live, the image of a human, unarmed, broken, standing over a fallen conqueror. People watched from ships, colonies, and mining stations. They watched from the ruins of Earth's outposts and from planets that had never heard of humanity before. And they saw the truth, that strength wasn't in power or weapons or numbers. It was in the will to rise when everything said to fall. The council chamber filled with a sound none had expected, quiet at first, then growing louder. It wasn't cheers. It was the sound of people standing, saluting, bowing their heads in respect. Alara looked around through half-closed eyes. She smiled faintly. That's better, she whispered. Her legs finally gave way. She fell forward, caught in the arms of two guards before she hit the floor. The speaker looked down at her, at the human who had turned the galaxy's oldest law into a lesson no one would forget. Rest now, Commander Miles, the speaker said softly. You've already won. The arena dimmed, the light fading into silence. And though she didn't hear it, across 1,000 worlds, one phrase began to spread, whispered, then shouted, then remembered for generations. She was unarmed, she didn't need to be. The council chamber was filled with smoke and silence. The air shimmered with leftover energy from the explosion. The walls of light that Alara had summoned still glowed faintly, humming with life before fading away. When it was finally safe to move, the guards stepped forward, scanning for signs of danger. What they found instead was a human, broken, burned, but breathing. Commander Alara Miles lay on her side, one hand still pressed to the floor as if she were holding the galaxy together by will alone. Her hair clung to her face, soaked in sweat and blood. Every breath she took sounded like a fight in itself, shallow, uneven, defiant. The speaker descended from the dais slowly, her long robes brushing the scorched metal beneath her feet. She stopped beside the fallen Varkun Prime, whose great body lay still and dark. His armor was cracked open, his power gone. He was alive, barely. The once invincible conqueror now looked small, just another creature brought low by something greater than himself. The speaker turned her gaze to Alara. Human, she said quietly, can you stand? Alara's eyes opened. They were glazed with exhaustion, but when she looked up, they burned with that same impossible fire. Not sure, she said, her voice raw, but I can try. She pushed herself up, first onto her elbows, then her knees, then her feet. The effort looked painful, but she refused to stop. The guards moved to help her, but she waved them off. The chamber was watching again. Counselors, soldiers, spectators, and the billions connected through the broadcast. Every race that had once mocked humanity now saw something different. They didn't see weakness, they saw endurance. Alara stood upright at last, shoulders slumped but head high. Her voice, though quiet, carried through the hall. I told you, she said, we don't need weapons. The words hung in the air like thunder. The speaker stared at her for a long moment, then lifted her staff. The trial by combat is ended, she declared. By the law of the Accord, the victor's race is granted recognition and protection. Humanity stands among us once more. A wave of murmurs spread through the council, disbelief, or even applause. The Varkun Prime stirred weakly, his broken claws scraping against the floor. This cannot be, he rasped. Alara turned to him, her expression soft but steady. You were right about one thing, she said. I was unarmed, but you never understood what that meant. He glared up at her. Then tell me, human, what does it mean? She stepped closer, kneeling beside him. It means I didn't need anything to fight for what mattered, just hands, just heart. The Varkun's golden eyes flickered one last time, then dimmed. His voice faded to a whisper. Then your kind will be feared. Alara looked down at him and shook her head. Not feared, she said softly, remembered. He went still. The speaker turned back to the council. This moment will be recorded in the history of the stars, she said. Let it stand as proof that courage is not measured in size or power. Alara barely heard her. The pain was catching up now. The adrenaline was gone, replaced by a deep ache that reached her bones. Her vision blurred. She swayed, and this time when the guards reached for her, she didn't stop them. They helped her to sit against the wall, where she could still see the center of the arena, the circle where she had fought, bled, and won. For the first time in years, she let herself breathe. The speaker knelt beside her. "You should rest," she said gently. "Your body has limits." Alara smiled faintly. "Yeah," she whispered, "but my people don't." The speaker studied her face as if seeing something she couldn't quite explain. "Your strength does not come from power," she said. "It comes from belief." Alara's eyes fluttered shut. "That's what keeps us alive." The speaker rose, turning toward the watching council. "Let it be known," she said, her voice ringing out across the chamber, "that the human species, once thought broken, has proven itself unbreakable. By the laws of the Accord, they are no longer exiled. Earth and its children shall rise again." The crowd erupted. Some cheered, some shouted, others bowed their heads in silence. But across the galaxy, where the broadcast reached, to miners on cold moons, to refugees on forgotten stations, to enslaved worlds under the Dominion's rule, the reaction was the same. Hope. It spread like wildfire. The image of a battered woman, standing unarmed before the galaxy's mightiest warrior, burned itself into their hearts. It wasn't about Earth anymore. It wasn't even about war. It was about what it meant to be human. Alara's voice, weak but steady, broke through the noise one last time. "Never count us out." The speaker looked down at her, her eyes shining. "They won't," she said softly, "not after this." The great dome above them began to open, revealing the stars beyond, countless points of light glittering in the black sky. The smoke cleared, and the light of a nearby sun spilled through, bathing the chamber in gold. Alara looked up at it and smiled. "That's home," she whispered. The speaker nodded. "And now the galaxy knows your name." Outside, across the networks of 1,000 civilizations, the story spread. The humans stood alone against the Dominion. The council cried, "She's unarmed." And she raised her hand and said, "You're right, I don't need one." In every language, in every corner of the stars, those words echoed, a promise, a warning, a spark. Some said it marked the rebirth of humanity. Others said it marked the beginning of a new era. But to those who had seen her fight, who had watched her stand tall when she should have fallen, it was something simpler. It was proof that there would always be someone, somewhere, who refused to give up, even when the universe itself said it was over. And in the center of the council's archives, under glass and starlight, they preserved one thing, the scorched floor of the arena where she had pressed her hand. The plaque beneath it read, "Here a human stood unarmed, and the stars remembered." The battle was over, but its echo moved through the stars. Weeks passed, and the news of the trial by combat reached every corner of the galaxy. It spread faster than light, carried by ships, whispers, and hope. Every world that had once turned away from Earth now spoke the same name, Alara Miles. Some called her the unarmed commander. Others called her the hand that changed the stars. But to humanity, she was something simpler, a reminder that they were not finished. The waking. Alara woke in a room of white light. The sound of slow, steady beeping filled the air. She opened her eyes to see the ceiling above her, soft panels glowing like sunlight. Her body ached, but the pain was dull now, distant, almost gentle. She tried to sit up, but her arm trembled. A nurse, not human but gentle and gray-skinned, rushed forward. "Easy," the nurse said softly. "You're safe." Alara blinked, her voice was weak. "How long?" "7 cycles," the nurse said. "You've been asleep for 7 days." Alara looked down at herself. Bandages wrapped her torso and arms. Her hair had been cut short. Her skin bore scars, reminders of every strike, every fall. But she was alive. "Where am I?" she asked. "The council's medical ward," the nurse said. "You were nearly gone when they brought you in." Alara smiled faintly. "That sounds about right." The nurse hesitated, then said quietly, "The galaxy is talking about you." Alara's brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" The nurse turned and pointed toward the window. Alara turned her head and froze. Outside the transparent wall, a planet glowed with blue and white light. Ships orbited above it in calm, steady patterns, and above them, hanging in space like a crown, was the sigil of the council. Below it, in bold letters, glowed a message written in 100 languages. "Humanity, member of the Accord." Alara's throat tightened. She closed her eyes, feeling tears she hadn't known she still had. After everything, the war, the exile, the loss, humanity was back among the stars. Not as beggars, not as victims, but as equals. Aye, the visit. Later that day, the speaker came to see her. The ancient woman walked slowly, her golden robes whispering against the floor. Her eyes, bright and old, held something like warmth. Alara tried to stand, but the speaker raised a hand. "Rest, child, you've earned that much." Alara sat back, smiling tiredly. "Didn't think I'd ever get that luxury." The speaker chuckled softly. "Few do." They were quiet for a moment. Outside, the stars drifted past like a slow tide. The speaker finally said, "You've changed the galaxy, Commander." Alara looked down at her hands. They were thin now, pale, still shaking. "I didn't mean to," she said softly. "I just wanted them to listen." "They did," the speaker said. "More than that, they believed." The old woman placed a small data crystal on the table beside her bed. "This contains the broadcast of your fight. The council voted to keep it public. Every species, every child, every student will know your name." Alara looked at the crystal, then back at her. "That's not why I fought." The speaker nodded. "I know, that's why it matters." They sat together for a while longer. Before leaving, the speaker turned at the door. "The Dominion has withdrawn from 3 systems. Other worlds are rising up. Your courage woke them." Alara smiled faintly. "One person doesn't change everything." The speaker's voice softened. "No, but one person shows everyone else that they can." Aye, the return. Months later, Alara stood on a transport ship approaching Earth. The view filled the windows, blue oceans, white clouds, green continents. For the first time in decades, the planet was alive again. Cities were being rebuilt. The scars of war were fading. As the ship entered the atmosphere, she could see people gathered in the streets, faces turned upward, waiting. When she stepped off the ramp, they cheered. Alara wasn't wearing a uniform anymore. Just a plain jacket, sleeves rolled to her elbows, a small metal band around her wrist, the mark of the Accord's recognition. A little girl ran forward, waving a handmade flag. "Are you really her?" she shouted. Alara knelt, smiling. "I don't know, who do you think I am?" The girl grinned wide. "The one who didn't need a weapon." Alara laughed, the sound soft and real. "Then I guess I am." Behind her, the sky was full of light, ships of 100 worlds arriving to help rebuild. The council had sent aid, engineers, teachers. For the first time in history, the galaxy wasn't looking down at humanity, it was reaching out to them. IV, the legacy. Years later, the story of the trial became legend. They taught it in schools, sang it in songs, carved it into monuments. The arena where she fought became a museum, a place of peace. In the center of that arena, under glass and quiet light, stood a single preserved section of the floor, the place where she had pressed her hand. Beneath it was written, "Here a human stood unarmed, and the stars remembered." The last message. Alara never sought power. She refused every offer, command, politics, glory. She returned to the colonies, helping to rebuild, training others to defend without hate. Before she died, many years later, she left one final message for the galaxy. It was short, simple, human. Her voice, older now but still strong, spoke across every network. "We were born fragile, we learned to endure. We were born small, we learned to stand tall. We were born unarmed, and we learned we didn't need to be." Epilogue. In the centuries that followed, humanity spread again, not as conquerors, but as builders, explorers, dreamers. Every ship that launched carried a small emblem on its hull, an open hand, palm forward, the symbol of peace, defiance, and courage. Children on distant worlds would press their hands against the stars and whisper the words that began it all. She was unarmed. She didn't need to be. And somewhere beyond those stars, in the quiet memory of the galaxy, the story of Alara Miles, the human who faced the impossible and won, would live forever. Because in the end, humanity's greatest weapon was never their strength. It was their heart,